I nearly would have been too emotive in my approach in the dressing room in the run-up to the final. Looked around the dressing room and I would have seen fellas almost crying. I've said, geez, I'm over the top here now, I've lacked the coldness or the calculated. And I know Galway saw us out the door the first 7 minutes, 6-0 or whatever.
"70 minutes from the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship final. Welcome to Corbett and McGrath's big build-up, brought to you by Centra." Lads, for the two Munster teams, they're coming to Croke Park for the first time this year. Well, first time in the championship anyway. Is it different? Does Croke Park change your psyche?
Yeah, well, look, I can only speak from a managerial experience in terms of we came there for the first time in 4 years in 2015, having won the league. It was a novelty factor for us in that we weren't expected to do much that year, so it was definitely different for us in that particular year anyway, in terms of just a different environment, a different build-up.
Yeah, it is different, and I always used to say this is where the hurling starts. So when you get to Croke Park, you're coming into this serious time of the year. So we would have done something kind of similar. We would have went up in 2001, when I first started, we would have went up the old road. The bypass wasn't fully formed at the time, so we used to go up the night before. And then in later years, then we used to meet in Thurles, and half the boys used to meet in the Midway. So the Midway to the hotel would be about an hour and 10 minutes. So that wasn't too bad. So them things are kind of similar enough. And then we would do our warm up, and we would have just done our kind of pre-warm up in the hotel and that. But when you get to Croke Park, you have to have all those things out of the way. So you have your foam rolling done, you have your warm up done. It's about taking in the surroundings and small little things. When you run out onto the field in Croke Park, right? So you have to visualise the crowd beforehand, so it's not daunting when you run out. But if you look down as far as even Hill 16, and the colour of the steps in Hill 16 is a concrete effect, and it's same nearly colour as the posts if it's not full. So when you're looking there, just say in mid-game, and the posts are white, the concrete is near enough white, you have to get used to that. So you want to be getting out and make sure when you get out to Croke Park, everything else should be sorted, but it's just about getting your eye right. So you want to have a bit of practice down that end. And then when you come up then to the canal end, and that's usually where Tipp do their warm up, is at the canal end, is sometimes the posts, you think that they're closer than what they are, because it is a bit surreal with the stand in the background and just say what way the posts are. But they're the one things I would say is taking the crowd in, taking the post in, taking your shot, and have a good look around. And then just say, get yourself ready, then just say for the ball to be thrown in.
Do people start thinking or even talking about All-Stars at this time of the year? Like, would that conversation be happening, or do you think it would be in the players' minds?
Lara was probably better versed in terms of answering that question. In terms of the team ethic, I would hope that they wouldn't be, but I think selfishly in a player's head, there's always individual goals for players, and I think people would be lying if they didn't kind of, ultimately, anytime a fella's interviewed, they'd say, I want the Celtic Cross and it's worth more than any All-Star, right? So if you look in 2 weeks' time, if we were having this conversation and we're talking about All-Stars or whatever, I still think there's a little bit of selfish kind of egotism in everybody, whereby they're kind of saying, geez, I might have a squeak at an All-Star, and I think that's kind of a natural inclination for anyone, because self-ambition is part of anyone's driving force. So I think, in terms of thinking about him coming up to Sunday, I don't think, for instance, Gillan or Pádraig Welsh or Lee Chin is saying, geez, if I don't play well, I won't get an All-Star. I think their ultimate focus ahead of Sunday is on winning the match for their county. But I think in the aftermath of it, say if they win or they lose and they play well, they might say, Jesus, I might get a sneak of something now in the next few weeks. I think that's only me putting myself in a position I would have loved to be in as a kind of a failed player, So I'm saying to myself, I made 2 championship appearances in '96 and '98, so All-Stars were far away from my compass, But I'm only trying to put myself on the head of a player there. But Lara would probably be well more versed, as I said, in that area.
What I'm getting from that is that Derek was a team player, but he's thinking maybe Lara wasn't.
Mulligar. But it's a very interesting question. And when you get to Croke Park, sometimes players do think different. And when managers are picking their panel in the beginning of the year, you have to visualise. I'm putting trust and faith in these players as individuals. But when we get to Croke Park, will he repay me back with the trust? So will he do the same things that he done in Thurles? Will he do the same things he done in Cusack Park? So you're handing all the trust over to players when they come to Croke Park. You're hoping that they'll do the right thing. Now, if a player comes up to Croke Park and they're thinking of an all-star, it will be the rock that they'll perish on. And what I mean by that is that the audience will see it. You'll see it in their demeanour, you'll see it in their play, you'll see it in their selfishness about not passing the ball, taking the wrong options. They're weird. So to give a prime example, if you look at a Bonner Mar for Tipperary, people would say his work rate is unbelievable. His honesty is unbelievable. And I'd say, lads, and I say Bonner's actually a sound fella, is he? I say he is. So you see it. Everything about him, you see it. So you wear your personality, you wear everything about you when you go out, and people are very, very quick to pick up on these things, and you can't hide it. So if that's in your mindset, it'll come out, and that'll be the mistake, and you'll see it.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, let's talk about Kilkenny v Limerick to start off with. We'll get to Tipperary, Lard, don't you worry. But Derek, how accurate is it to call Kilkenny a new team? Because they seem to have a lot of familiar faces.
Yeah, look, I was in a bar in Santa Ponsa, Sean's place in Santa Ponsa there in 2014.
Limerick there.
Yeah, but I'm referencing it. I was in 2014. I strolled up. One of the few hours I was allowed to stroll up on my own. I went up on my own to watch Limerick and Kilkenny in a bar in Santa Ponsa in 2014. I remember it was lashing rain. And I just had a look back at that game just during the week. I was saying how many, and there was 8 Kilkenny players involved that are involved on Sunday or on Saturday evening now, and I was struck by that. When people say, oh, it's a new Kilkenny team, or when I hear the word transition about Kilkenny, even 4 of the backs that are, if Killian Buckley's involved, Joey Holden was involved, Paul Murphy, Conor Fogarty was involved, Richie Hogan was involved, TJ Reid, Colin Fennelly was involved. You have 8 players involved, a couple of fellas off the bench as well, and I'm saying to myself, geez, the nucleus of and the cohort of players are still there in Kilkenny. Yeah, you add your Adrian Mullins and you add, your Billy Ryan's off the bench and your Bill Sheen off the bench and you add your couple of new players to it. Conor Brown played the last time. But for me, there was still the cohort of players. And the interesting thing from a Limerick point of view was there was only 2 outfield Limerick players that played. Declan Hannon and Graham Mulcahy. Nicky Quaid was on the goal and Shane Dowling actually got 1-6 or 1-7 and Declan Hannon was a forward that day. So it was just an interesting kind of, I thought, parallel between 5 years on in terms of the amount of changes that have been in Limerick. But for me, it just establishes the fact that, yeah, it's a new team in terms of media perception. But I still think there's a cohort of guys that are involved that are still central to Kilkenny's performance. Like Pádraig Welch was wing forward, got 2 points that day in 14, and now he's centre back. So it goes to show how things change and evolve,
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting sort of battle of styles as well, isn't it, Laura? Because Limerick are bringing a possession-based game, whereas Kilkenny are a bit more old-fashioned, can you call them?
Yeah, I know. I think so. I think the television is going to do this game an injustice. I think this is a game that you actually have to be at just to see. Now, I'm not making Saturday, I'm making Sunday, but I think I'd love to be going Saturday. This is the new style of hurling that Limerick are after in possession game, breaking the lines, hand pass possession, and then setting up a score. Kilkenny is kind of, they are changing, but it's kind of their old style is after winning 10 All-Irelands or so, hitting the ball long, getting in, and the word work rate seems to spell something different in Kilkenny than any other county. So they're using the word work rate, but it seems to get them over the line more often than not. And for instance, Tommy Welsh has been on record saying is that when they were starting out their puck outs when he was playing, he says, lads, you hit it out, it's up to us to win it. So that's the way they play, that's the way they're kind of still playing. I think it's changing, and that's why I'm really, really looking forward to how Limerick play the game. They're a fine-tuned engine as regards breaking the lines. That Cork try to adopt a lot of the same things that Limerick do, but I think that Limerick will execute it that bit better.
Yeah, and we can call them old-fashioned if we like, but you've picked out a great example here from the Cork game where Kilkenny show that they're getting a lot of street smarts about them. So we'll pull up the clip and we'll have a look at it here.
This clip is in the second half. You've Conor Fogarty and Paul Murphy waiting on the half back line, but actually follow the ball back in. You see him here. Now it's 4-on-2. But and Kilkenny win it. But that happened from just after half time, is that the 2 guys stayed on the 45 on their own. So more often than not, they actually got the ball that was being hit in by the Cork midfielders or even their half back. So in the first half, you had the Cork full forward line. They went to town. They got in ball after ball after ball into both corners. In the second half, Kilkenny had to make a decision. They left Paul Murphy and Conor Fogarty on the 45, and they said, right, so create a war zone out around the middle of the field. The Kilkenny half-backs or Kilkenny half-forward are going to have to come back, crowd it out, but there's going to be no easy scores coming in past us here, and we're going to try and cut out maybe the goal threat. Now, I know that it didn't work 100% of that, but it definitely worked in Kilkenny's favour.
Yeah, Cork sort of panicked, didn't they? Because there was that war zone, and then they were hitting it to the two boys they wanted them to hit it.
They were hitting it because it worked in the first half. So I think when Cork won it, I don't think they put their head up, had a look and made the right option as regards percentage. I don't think Limerick are going to make that mistake when they look up and if they see two backs on the 45, if it is Conor Fogarty, if it is Paul Murphy or Joey Holden, when they look up, I don't think they're going to hit it on top of Kilkenny. So Kilkenny are going to have a plan B for that.
Like, because Limerick's half-forward line will be too clever for that, right?
Yeah, and I think Cork made mistakes as well in that some of the short puckers that went to Sean O'Donoghue in particular, when he said to himself, right, if Conor Fogarty is holding the line here, Joey Holden is holding the line here, if I go along, they're going to swamp it. The ones that they tried to run out, invariably they got overturned. Now, that's where the Kilkenny work ethic comes in, but for me, it's what you could see on Saturdays. You could see both sets of backs almost not following their men to a certain extent. So the dual role of the half-forward line of John Donnelly, TJ Reid, even Walter Walsh if he's out there, Adrian Mullen was out there in the second half, they'll have a dual role, A, to score against their direct opponents, but also to have a battle on their hands against Morrissey, Hegarty and Hayes. And that's the intriguing thing, which will allow then both half-back lines to kind of sit to a certain extent and not follow. And it'll be a numbers game. And Limerick, the advantage Limerick may have there is they tend to bring out the full forward line as well out to that area. And they nearly always have numbers. And they have the power and the physique to maybe try and run through Kilkenny as opposed to just hitting it into that area where we saw in the example there that Lars showed, where Conor Fogarty would outnumber a Gillane against a Joey Holden or a Gillane against a Paul Murphy or whatever the matchups are. So I think you'll see Limerick taking the ball into the tackle and hoping to offload kind of little give and goes in around that war zone, if you like. Yeah. And they have that perfected to a certain extent. And I think that'll be the interesting thing for me. I think there'll be lots of balls where you'll see the ball will be hit in and Richie English might be on his own clearing a ball to someone. The ball might be hit in and Conor Fogarty might be on his own. So that'll be the intriguing thing about it. You know, it's going to be 100 miles an hour, but it'll be tactical enough too.
Yeah, it seems to me that like Limerick always seem to set the terms of engagement. You know, we're always talking about their setup and that war zone that they create. So if you don't mind, Derek, I might ask you to pull out the old tactics board and just look at how Limerick set up. All right, Derek, so we're looking at this from the Kilkenny puck outs. Yeah, look, there's a couple of things, I suppose. It's just Limerick normally set up, we'll say, last day they put Peter Casey in full forward and James Barry. It's something they might look at again because a smaller lad might give Hugh Lawler that bit more trouble than a gangly lad, if you like. And they normally have Gillane and Graham Mulcahy in the other corner. So what they've done up to this, and they've done regularly, I suppose, and Lars showed it the last time where we showed a clip of Gillane being in here on his own, on the opposition puck out. Just imagine that Owen Murphy goes long down onto Walter Walsh here. So the right half forward in this area, Tom Morrissey, will be right back on the break here. And invariably what happens is one of the corner forwards, particularly on that side, will start heading out. And he'll hope that Joey Holden will go with him. And he'll be out here by the time, you know, the ball lands on Walter Welch, if you like. And Garrod Hegarty or Tom Morrissey is in possession here. And what Limerick end up, they also end up pushing Kyle Hayes and they push Tom Morrissey or Garrod Hegarty, whichever the wings are here. And they end up with a wall of 5 across the middle here. And they end up with 2 inside. Now what they often always also do is they'll bring out the other corner forward. Graham Mulcahy will even come as far as here. Not as far enough so that Paul Murphy perhaps will come with him. And Lars showed the last time, he had a picture of Gillane just here on the edge of the square with everyone else out the field. So that brings the whole issue of TJ Reid into question. If TJ Reid is here and he's wandering out the field, Declan Hannon can now probably sit here as he did last year in the quarter-final. He conceded 3 points to Richie Hogan early in the quarter-final last year. And if it's a war zone and Walter Welch is out here, Diarmuid Burns nearly always sits here as well. So you have a case where Limerick are able to be completely zonal. The interesting thing that they also do, if we just reset for a second, what they also do at times with their puck out situations is when the ball is being struck from the other on their own puck out. So just imagine we're after putting Nicky Quaid in goal here, right? For their own puck out to ensure that
they have someone on the break of the Garrod Hegarty pucket who's very good in the air. They often bring the corner forward out onto the break of the long puck out here, so that they have a body between Walter Walsh or Adrian Mullen and the break of Garrod Hegarty. So it's just an interesting thing that we would have done it in Waterford as well. If you have an extra body out in the middle of the field, and then what happens, what Garrod Hegarty has to ensure here, or Tom Morrissey has to ensure, is that the ball doesn't break through, because otherwise Joey Holden or Paul Murphy has a free possession. So we'll say Nicky Quaid goes long here into the half forward line, and it's broken, but Casey has the break here, and he also allows Diarmaid Burns to sit back here, because he's the first chaser when Walter Welch comes onto the break. We used to put it more crudely in Waterford. I used to say you need to have your arse between the break of the ball and Walter Welch, if you like, in terms of when the ball breaks. And it answers the question perhaps that I was asked the last time about Daniel Carney. How do you stop a guy getting 5 points in play? It's a numbers game, and Limerick just tend to dominate it with numbers out there. But they also, as Lara referred to, they have the cleverness then to work it. If Joey Holden is in here, or if Paul Murphy, they've stayed back, they'll work it and they'll try and run it in until the ball is in to Galan. So it's an interesting way that they go about their business, and it's very, very systematic, very organised, but yet they're able to flow within that kind of systematic approach, which is what everyone wants, really,
Yeah, and how do Kilkenny counteract that war zone that they always create around the middle?
Well, for me, the only way is to actually is to counter it by mirroring it. You actually mirror it. So what you could see is, as Hegarty and Hayes, or Hegarty and Morrissey and Hayes are coming into that war zone, that you're made here with Walter Walsh, TJ Reid, Adrian Mullen, and a Ger Elward, or a Bill Sheen, or a Billy Ryan, or a John Donnelly, and they're in the area as well. And then what you have is the half-back line of Conor Fogarty, Pádraig Walsh, Killian Buckley, I can't quite think who's left half-back for a minute, and you have Diarmaid Burns, Hannon, and Dan Morrissey free, and you'll have just complete kind of almost zonal defences. But again, what Limerick will counter that by having someone out here and someone out here, and they'll have one inside, and they'll hope to be able to find the spaces in Croke Park to be able to ping it around at pace and play little 1-2s and be able to get into the scoring zone as well, which makes it more interesting. Again, Lara said it, Kilkenny will call that work rate. John Kiley will call that work rate. Afterwards, they're interviewed afterwards, they say that was work rate, as if there was absolutely zero planning involved in the whole strategy around the game. But from being involved in it, there's a definite strategy involved in that element as well. The day of a fella just turning up and saying to themselves, we're going to outwork the opposition. Yeah, it's part of it, hooks, blocks and tackles, but there's certainly a lot of strategy involved too. Yeah.
Brian Cody will just say it all ebbed and flowed anyway, so we don't really get into it too much. But for key battles, lads, you have picked Pádraig Walsh against Kyle Hayes. Lar, why have we picked those two?
We picked those two. I think that they're in the form of their life, both players, and they're probably arguably like the top two, best hurlers in Ireland at the minute. I think that they're two go-to players for both their teams. I think if Pádraig Walsh is winning the high ones, he's going up the field, and if he sets up his score, it's kind of more than a score. It's setting a tone of what Kilkenny are made of today. And Kyle Hayes, we see that he goes out deep, but when he's on the run in for either a point or a goal, his aggression levels are very, very high, and he knows where the goal is, and he's a hard man to stop when he's in full flow. So I think that's going to be a huge battle. I think it's going to be a physical battle, and I think whoever wins that is going to dictate a lot of how the result is going to go on today.
Yeah. Do you have any predictions, Derek McGrath?
Yeah, I fancy Limerick to win, and in terms of just the overall scene, the only thing there's not the Cody factor, the Kilkenny factor in terms of being written off so much, in terms of what they'll always bring to the party, in terms of the work ethic, I suppose, and the level of planning that perhaps is not as we don't hear about it as much, but I still think they love this tag that they have now ahead of them, and they love nothing better than Saturday, where everyone will kind of say, Cork were out, Cork had him on the run in the first half, but Kilkenny, ground them down, and they love all that. And I think that guises the actual ability they have. Any forward line that has Adrian Mullen, Colin Fennelly, TJ Reid, Richie Hogan, is a forward line that has to be completely respected. And I think Limerick will absolutely respect them. But I just think Limerick will, I go to the league match in Nolan Park in February. I think Limerick were 14 points up 50 minutes into that game. And the damage that day was done by Conor Boylan and Shane Dowling. And they're not even featuring, on Sunday. So I think the Limerick machine will gain confidence from how they played in the Munster final. And I think they'll relish the physical challenge as well of Sunday. And I expect them to win. I don't know how comfortable, but I expect them to win and to be the first team in the All-Ireland.
Our Corbett, prediction?
Yeah, so I think that Kilkenny are timing their run. What I mean by timing their run, you have Walter Welsh coming back into, missed a few games, coming back in. You have Richie Hogan, we saw it the last day, he's back into, and Croke Park is not a daunting place for these guys because they've done it there before. Richie Hogan is probably have to say to himself Sunday evening, what do I have to do to stay in the field? Got 1-2, got taken off, and I saw a slight shake of the head when he was being taken off. I think he'd be disappointed that he was taken off because his goal dictated the result that day. As regards when he got that goal, everyone kind of knew, yeah, this is Kilkenny's day. Then we have this new style of hurling that Limerick are doing, and they're probably in their third year of perfecting it. I think this style of hurling, this possession game, is here to stay. What Derek is saying is 100% right. This Kilkenny team have to be respected, and I think if you give them the respect that they deserve, as regards, you have to match them with their work rate. But I think that Limerick are going to be a little bit more clever on the ball, and Limerick are going to be Limerick are going to win. I agree with Derek, first team in the All-Ireland.
Okay, Tipperary v Wexford, lads, and I want to talk about James Barry to start off with, because there's been a bit of conversation around whether or not he's going to start, based around his role against Laois the last day. He was left as a free man, and the question is there somebody else who can come in and play instead of him? So, Lara, what do you think?
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of talk about James, and I think it started from the Limerick game, the goal that Kyle Hayes got the flick, and then the last day he was isolated, and I think that Laois had their homework done. So the tactic that Laois had been at the game looking down on it was that go man on man, push everyone back down the field, Laois's spare man, put them into their backs, leave James have the ball. James probably got about maybe 8 puck outs, and James was isolated as such. His options were limited, and the clip we're going to show later is that James gets a shot maybe 80 yards out, goes for it, and it goes wayward, it goes wide, and it probably looks as a bad wide on the television. But to me, that's a lacking in confidence shot from James. That's not the James Barry that we play club hurling again, that's a club out the road from his back home. James Barry, more often than not, on his own 45, no problem, between the posts. He could get 2, 3, 4 a game if you give him that. So it's just a confidence issue with James, and a small bit of help from the people around him to create a bit more space.
So we'll look at the clip that we're talking about. So this is after James Barry missed the first chance, and then he gets another puck out and he comes out with it, and we'll see what he does. So let's pull up the clip.
So this is a short puck out to James, and they give him the space, and then we'll just say the defenders now to go to attack, and just I think the short puck out was playing on James's mind from his shot before, that he went for. He's in two minds here. He's not too sure. I think James, looking at these clips himself, will be a little bit disappointed. That's not the James Barry, and that's not who he is. James Barry is a different hurler than that, and I think the management, I think Liam is going to play a huge role this week in restoring the confidence, and Liam is very, very good 1-to-1. He will make you feel a little bit better about you than what you are. Yeah, no,
let's get the tactics board up, because I want to see what exactly should have happened in that situation.
And what we're going to show here in the tactics board is how people around him could have helped James.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for me to sit here and say what James done wrong. Now we're going to say is what maybe Tipp could have done to help James on the day.
Okay, so this is basically the setup. Tipperary v Laois. We have Wexford in, just because we're going to talk about Wexford in a second. But if you want to take it away, James Barry's here, Tipp are going this way. What happened and what should have happened?
Yeah, this is a replica of the Tipp and Laois game. And I was in the canal end looking down on the field, and you could see it, just say the longevity of it, and you could see the players in front of you. So in my opinion, Laois set up to contain Tipp. I think Laois had it in their mind, if we lose by between 8, 10, 11, 12 points here, it's an okay day. Wexford can't set up like that. Wexford have to, some part of it, attack. But just to show you how the whole system was a little bit unfair on James on the day. So you have a Rowan and Maher, you had a Brendan Maher, a Pádraig Maher and a Cottle Barra for the puck out, so things were well pushed out. So you had a goalie here, a goalie was passing it to James. The goalie then was out of the game. So to me, this is nearly the goalie that's taken the game on to Laois. So in my opinion here, as an out, I think that Brian Hogan should have been taking a decision to come out here as an option. Now it's a little harder to see it on this smaller condensed area, but there was a lot of room here to give James an out. What happened was when James got it here, more often than not, when he looked down the field, it was congested, man-on-man mark. And not only that, man-on-man, there was actually a spare Laois defender down here as well. So he took a shot on for the score. It didn't work out. Then there was not many options here. So you have to bring your goalie back into it. And even if it is just to give it back to the goalie, and he's coming down along this side here, maybe just about 30 yards out, and he could put it down into the edge of the square. Because as we know that Brian Hogan has a huge strike of the ball. Not only that, I think that another question should have been asked of the Laois forwards by the Tipp backs. And what I mean by that, I firmly believe that Ronan Maher, if Ronan Maher went here, I reckon would have been followed. I think if Brendan Maher went here, he would have been followed. I reckon if any of the other Tipp, just say backs were here, I reckon this way would have ended up for the puck out. I reckon they were told beforehand, James is okay to have the ball, man mark your man, and we have a get out strategy with a spare man down here. I reckon that James and Brian would have having this part of the field to themselves. I do think that if two of the shots went over the bar, Laois would have having to make a different decision, say, lads, we need to push up. But Laois had it in their mind that we're going to just contain Tipp, we're going to be maybe 8 to 12 points, maybe a difference here, but it's going to look like we're going to go for it. But they never set up properly to take the game on as the game unfolded. I do think that Wexford will have to go about it a different way, but it's important. If there's a backman marking you for a puck out, how far is he prepared to go with you? That if we have a shot here, and James did get out as far as midfield. He got a short puck out here, so he got as far as midfield and he went for a shot. It didn't work out, but there should have been a small bit more help for James on the day.
So tell me this, like Derek was saying on another day, say James Barry might have scored 2 points and it would have sort of kept Laois honest. They wouldn't have done it again, but if he had missed a second shot, say, if you were a corner forward, would you not be screaming at him, saying, "What? Like you're wasting ball up there. Like put it into me." You know, does that sort of put James Barry under a bit of pressure? Then
I think then when you're a player and this you're looking at it, I think you have it's none of your business where the ball goes after you strike. If it goes over the black spot or if it goes wide, you made the proper decision there. You made the percentage chance that the score was on. If your accuracy is a little bit off, that's fair enough. But when you make the right decision, part of the team, you have to suffer the consequences. Let them be good, bad or indifferent. So James made the right decision here to go for it. It didn't work out. To me, it shouldn't have affected his confidence. You have to take it on. It's the right option. Some days you could get four shots, you get 4 points. Another day you could get 4 shots but it's none of your business where it goes. Was it the right decision there and then? You can't think after the thought, or you can't think after the result. Was it a good or bad decision?
Yeah. So Derek, this is an interesting one because obviously now Tipperary have experience playing against a 7th defender in Laois. They're coming up against Wexford. How are they going to go about getting around this 7th defender?
If you have the Tipp killers, as I call them, we say John McGrath 15, Shamey Callan 14, you know, even Bubbles at 13 or Jason Ford at 13. The interesting thing for me in the Laois game was that it was when Shamey Callan came outside. So you just imagine if there's a Kevin Foley just situated here, which he will be, right? And Shamey then has to deal with Liam Ryan man-to-man here. John McGrath has to deal with Damien Reck if he's fit again, man-to-man here. Jason Ford has to deal with Simon Donoghue. All good man markers, very good man markers. If Bubbles is outside, he might have to deal with a Matthew Hanlon or a Paddy Foley. Plus they have to deal with the extra defender. Noel McGrath will probably be detailed. Liam McGovern will be saying, you know, I have the legs on this fella. If we clamp on Noel McGrath in terms of the deliveries, we've one big outlet taken away from Tipperary's kind of weaponry, if you like. So they've dealt with it before, Tipperary, in terms of even playing ourselves or playing Wexford. But the interesting thing for me would be what you might see, and you've often seen even against Laois, was that a lot of the damage was done when John McGrath found himself outside the cordon of where Kevin Foley situated himself. Even Shamey Callan outside the cordon. you know, and sometimes they get their scores. And what you could see is, we played Tipperary in the 2015 Munster final, our played himself, where you had a situation where Niall O'Mara became the nuisance factor for the Kevin Foley's. He became the guy that was detailed to bring your man, but also be near Kevin Foley. And that kind of, and him not, and it's the greatest respect to Niall O'Mara, a very good hurler, but he's not the killer that the other guys are, in terms of Dwyer, in terms of John McGrath, in terms of Noel McGrath, in terms of Shamie Callan and Jason Ford. They're the killers in their forward line. So Niall O'Mara became that guy that had to act as the kind of nuisance factor towards you know, the Kevin Foley's of the world. So what you'll see is, you often see Tipp then having the space. What they did something like to Limerick in the round robin game in the Munster Championship, where Shamie Callan was outside playing little passes from outside until the gaps opened up. You know, there was an incident in the last game where Jason Ford whizzed the ball wide just after Shamie Callan got a point, and he did it on the back of just being in there on his own, 1 against 4. And they're going to have to live with that situation where they're one against 4 at the weekend. The danger for Tipperary is, the one thing they need to be mindful of, and it's just something when you come up against 7 defenders, is they'll have Brendan Maher, they'll have Pádraig Maher freed at this end. They need to be careful, because they have one free. They were inclined the last day to say, Jesus, we'll go. Alan Flynn can go. Ronan Maher will go. Cathal Barrett will go. You know, and then all of a sudden, it becomes a 2 against 3 situation up here. So you have Conor MacDonald and Paul Morris against 3. And there's a lot of space in Croke Park to be able to kind of manipulate a situation where, because there's all this space, at the end of the day, like, if you have 7 against 6 on one side, it's 13 players. And you have 6 against 5 on the other side, it's 11 players. If you're a forward, like, you'd rather play in the area where there's 11 players as opposed to 13. So Tipp just need to be careful that they're not too gung-ho. What we would have often done in Waterford, even when we played with a 7 defender, we would have said to Dara Fives, if he was number 5. So we'd have Conor Gleeson man marking here at 7, we'd say on a Conor MacDonald or on a Richie Hogan or on the Lar Corbett, and he'd be gone everywhere with him. But we would have said to Dara Fives, tuck here every now and again with Tig. Tuck here. And it looks extremely defensive, but the reality is most of the corner forwards are coming out, and Dara Fives then becomes an outlet for the puck out then from you'll see Diarmuid Burns doing it with Limerick. And it's just something Tipp need to be mindful of, that they're not completely opened up on the back of this complete, we'll press them and we'll turn them up and we trust our 5 against 5 at the back. It's just, they need to be completely very mindful of that, particularly on, and where Wexford have that perfected is, they have it perfected on their own puck out. So what Wexford often do on their own puck out is, they have a situation which, because they have Kevin Foley here, and we'll see this in a clip in a few minutes for the goal chance, they did this the last time. Mark Fanning goes long, down onto Jack O'Connor, or down the middle, onto Lee Chin. He'll go as long as he can. And the wing backs will actually go onto the breaks. The wing backs will go on the breaks. And what will happen then is Kevin Foley's able to slip out the wing back, and they still have 6 backs because it's gone to the side. So it's just an interesting thing before they filter it back. They have that system down to a T. It's just Tipperary need to be mindful of, because, you know, committing everyone forward because they have the cover at the back. Because Wexford are good at manipulating situations to suit themselves.
Yeah, well, let's pull up that clip you're talking about, because there's 2 good goal chances that Wexford leave behind, and they're going to need to be a lot more economical in this game. So we'll pull it up here.
Yeah, look, the interesting thing is, this is just before half-time, Rory O'Connor give and go, and if you just look to the left, there's a definite goal chance for Paul Morris. If he takes it another yard before he strikes there, draws Paul Murphy, slips it to Paul Morris. And similarly here, the ball eventually breaks to Lee Chin. And again, as an example, you'll see Paddy Foley is to the right of the picture. If he goes with an arrowed ball to Conor MacDonald, you can see Conor MacDonald, his hands are in the air. He's a bit of frustration on him. But just to emphasise what we showed on the tactic board there, Paddy Foley has made the first run from right half back because the cover is back there. So he's gone. And if he just arrows a ball there, almost like Bubbles' ball to John McGrath for the ball, you know, and the Tipperary are masters at it. You know, I think Wexford had 3-4 wides the last in the Leinster final. Right, and I'd argue that they had 2 good goal scoring chances if there's an extra pass given, right? My argument is that they'll need those 2 goals, and they'll need to give that extra ball to get over the line against Tipperary, and they'll need to be as economical as they were the last day in terms of the wides and their option taking.
Yeah, it's going to be a hell of a tactical battle, and like to that end, for your key battle, you've both picked Davy Fitzgerald against Liam Sheedy, so it's a first in looking at the management teams. But like Laura, you were saying that they're going to have to do something different, right, Tipperary, because Davy will have his homework done.
Yeah, it's going to come down to, it's going to be a tactical game. And if you look at Tipp this year, you have Shane McCallum inside on serious form, but he's on serious form because of the ball that Noel McGrath and Pádraig Maher and Ronan Maher and Brendan Maher, but nearly Paddy down the middle. If you look at Paddy, Noel, Shamey, there's a clear line there, and at the minute our Tipp a little bit too predictable. I think that Davy is going to come out the weekend and I think he's going to man mark Noel. They're going to stop the supply coming in. They're not going to leave Paddy Maher as a free man. They're going to say they want to stop the supply there. If we stop the supply there, Shane McCallum and John McGrath, whoever's side, but just say if you pick Shamey down along the middle, is going to be starved and cut off the supply line, and we'll go a long ways towards beating Tipperary. So if it starts on the weekend, and Noel McGrath knows he's going to be man marked for the day, and that means that Noel is taken out and the supply is taken out, Noel has to start thinking different here. So for instance, I think that a Wexford player is going to get, he's going to get a job tonight. And he's going to say, this is your job, you're marking Noel McGrath, he's out midfield, your job is just to stop him. So it's up then to Tipp when they come on Sunday that they change it quick. So I would like to see, if Noel knows that he's going to be out midfield and he's going to be marked, I would like to see that Noel, and if his Bubbles is centre, that Bubbles is coming out, that Noel is going in. So this player got a job on a Thursday night, he's saying, right, so my job wasn't to follow Noel, I thought he was going to stay out midfield. And if Noel wants to take a trip in as far as full and comes out with Shamey, now you have a player on Wexford that got a job on a Thursday night, out midfield, that likes playing midfield, is full back for his county team in Croke Park, first time in an All-Ireland semi-final since 2003. Geez, Davy never told me about this. It only takes 2 or 3 minutes in the start of the game for things to crack. So then Noel doesn't have to stay there. Noel and Bubbles and Shane McCallum should have a licence of free up along that middle. If there's a man going to follow me for the day, well, he better be ready to go places and where he never decided or never thought he was going to be. He never thought he was going to be inside full back. You might get a goal opportunity, but you also have a guy that's out midfield in control at the edge of the square because he's after following in Noel. Now that player might make a decision, I'm not supposed to follow him that far. Now Noel knows he's not marking him for the day, so now it's Noel knows where he can get his bit of freedom. Bubbles is coming out for his bit of freedom, and up along that middle channel we've often heard that teams around the forward line do change, but backs now don't mind where they end up, but midfielders do not like end up inside full back.
Yeah. So then straight away it's like Liam Sheedy asking a question of David Fitzgerald. He's putting it back onto him. And
if the Wexford team come with a man marking job, that means that they asked the question beforehand. Then about the players then for Tipperary, it means that they answered the question. Now Davy has another question to ask within 5 minutes of the first half.
Could that rattle you a bit in the dugout? Because I know if you're a player and things are going exactly as the manager said it would go, you get so much confidence, you know, because you're like he has done his homework. Yeah. But when things are going wrong,
I think the scenarios, it's scenario based, and I think Davy, as well as Liam Sheedy and Darragh Egan and Tommy Dunn and Eamon O'Shea and all the lads, I think and this is where I often find the difference between not in-depth analysis and maybe some of the analysis that's out there. The scenarios would have been created. So if you look at the Wexford midfield, if Liam McGovern and Diarmuid O'Keefe have played midfield all year, right? None of them are really what I'd call man markers. So Davy is left with a choice now, you know. They're very athletic, right? Diarmuid O'Keefe was man marked the last time by Conor Fogarty because he got 4 points in the round robin game. So Davy, for me, he has a choice. So he's either going to say to himself, we're going to put Noel McGrath and Breen or Noel McGrath and young Brown or Dan McCormack on the back foot by running them into the ground, and therefore then that'll be our kind of man marking element. Or he's going to say we're man marking Noel McGrath, right? More likely to do than Noel McGrath. But I'd say he's intricate enough to be able to say if he does go to the corner, he becomes your man, Simon O'Donoghue. That the scenarios are nearly painted to such a degree whereby, you know, we expect him maybe to go in 10, we expect him to go to 12. Now the problem is, and as Lars said, it's the transition between the positions where you get caught, and then all of a sudden the communication is not at the level needed. He's in with Liam Ryan for a minute, he's passing him over, and in the 10 seconds that you're passing him over to another guy, he's after nabbing you for a goal, he's after creating a goal, he's after asking the questions. That for me is the area. I think early on, Lara's right. I think he will man mark him and keep him out of the game and say, we're stopping the supply, we're stopping Pádraig Maher supplying. Who else do we need to stop in terms of the drying it up for Tipperary? But I think a lot of those scenarios are actually talked about in advance. This is what happens when we're shape 1, this is what happens when we're shape 2, this is what needs to happen, and they're talked about. Not to the extent where a fella's head is bamboozled with, Jesus Christ, do I need to be, X's and O's, do I need to be standing here, or can I play at all? I don't think it's to that extent, but I think the guys like the information, and I think they're getting the information, and support and all that will be the matchup between Fitzy and Sheedy, in that it'll be, Wexford's mentality will be, we're free because we won the Leinster Championship. So if you wanted to be selfish, you could say Wexford's year is a success. There's a trophy on the table, right? But that gives you a sense of freedom as well. It almost reminds you when Clare won in 95, they played Galway in the semi-final and everyone was saying Clare had a homecoming. But that gives you a sense of freedom, and it gives you a sense of, hey, we're here now. And Davy will use all his motivational tools to be able to say Tipperary had zero respect, even though they have plenty of respect for Wexford. I can be sure they're probably nearly saying in amongst their dressing room that, Tipperary have always had the slick hurlers, we're renowned for this, blah, 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 and he'll hope to get the collective over the line. Whereas Sheedy has a different job, if you like. He needs to kind of revisit the earlier emotion of the first Cork game, the Waterford game, the first Limerick game, where the freshness of bubbles, the reinvigorated Tipperary needs to represent itself now. And that's the intriguing thing for me, the battle in terms of motivation, where that work ethic. And for Tipp to win, I think you'll need big performances from the lesser lights, the Dan McCormicks, the Niall O'Mara's, the James Barrys of the world. I think you'll need that to fuse with the brilliance, re-emergence of the bubbles that's had a slight dip, if you like, or Noel McGrath, or even Breen. Does he play him now and say we need his athleticism on Sunday? He's had the dropping, if you like. Do we go with his athleticism? Do I pick up something from tonight's match in the under-20 match and say, here, I'm going to throw a novice in here now. This fella's on form, and I'm going to throw. I don't see it particularly happening, but I think you'll see a higher work ethic from Tipperary than you've seen in the other matches. And that's why it's such an intriguing thing between Liam and Davy, even though they'll tell you it's all about on the field, and they're probably right. But I think the amount of planning that's probably gone into it is huge,
I'd say Davy Fitzgerald would suck motivation out of a cornflake if he could, would you have done that as a manager? Would you pin something to the changing room wall? Would you say, did you hear what he's been saying?
No, 1 out of 10 times, 2 out of 10 times. The sustainability of that type of approach is questionable. I won't tell a lie, the semi-final of 17, we felt a complete injustice was served on us with Tyg de Burke's treatment in the DRA. Even though it's a judicial review, we just felt that he was hard done by over the helmet incident, and he was so pivotal to everything we had done. We would have kind of cranked it up emotionally in the dressing room around Tyg and what he had brought to the whole thing. And it sounds a bit gimmicky, but we had we had a little kind of picture of him up and on the way out of the changing room, and that kind of stuff. This is not. We did. And look, it's grand when you talk about it afterwards. And the reverse of that would have got that completely wrong in the All Ireland final, and that Conor Gleeson was suspended. And I almost tried to simulate it. And Conor, a lot of personal tragedy in his life, lost his brother in a farming accident a number of years ago, and I nearly would have been too emotive in my approach in the dressing room. In the run-up to the final, looked around the dressing room and I would have seen fellas almost crying. I've said, geez, I'm over the top here now, I've lacked the coldness or the calculated. I know Galway saw us out the door the first 7 minutes, 6-0 or whatever, but I think you learn. I certainly learned from that emotion, that was attached to a dressing room, but I think if you can have it just right, that edge just right. Lara's been in more winning dressing rooms than me, where he knows Sheedy even better, where the edge is there, where you're kind of that balance between being absolutely nailed on to your job and enjoying it as well, and that's a powerful place.
Lads, predictions. Who's going to win? Tipperary or Wexford?
I think Tipperary will win, but I'm tighter on this than the other semi-final, believe it or not. I hope Wexford play really well, and that's not because I know Davy personally, and I think the language around systematic approaches to has changed, and I think it's been a good change. When Tipp beat us in the 2016 final, it was described as being good for hurling on the basis of kind of a robotic, mechanical approach from us. And I think that's changed, looking even at Laois's approach. And I hope Wexford can bring a really fluid approach to the game. And I think they will create many chances, Wexford, because they'll get lots of possession. But I'm banking, I suppose, on Tipperary's ability to be able to get more out of the fellas who've had a mid-season dip in form. And I'm repeating myself. Bubbles, John McGrath, Noel McGrath. And I'm banking on maybe coming with something a little bit different. You know, maybe, you know, we're talking off camera beforehand, I was talking to Lara that Bubbles and John McGrath are very good in the air as well. And they haven't shown that yet. Like, you know, where maybe they'll win one in the air. Jason Ford won a couple of great balls against Laois in the air, just, you know, in tight. And I still think Tipp have the machines to hurt Wexford in tight areas. And that's what I'm banking on. Maybe even in extra time, you know, and I'd love to see it going right down to the wire. I'm hoping that it will. And yeah, I think Tipp will edge it.
Lar?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm just going to go back a few weeks. If you look at the last round robin in Munster, Tipp and Limerick and Thurles. After that, Tipp won. Tipp were the number 1 team in Ireland. Everyone's saying Tipp for the All-Ireland. They're the form team in the championship this year. They're going to win the All-Ireland, or they're going to be in it. They're number 1. You talk now, there's 4 teams left. People are saying Tipp are team number 4. After the performance in the Munster final, the performance against Laois. So it's how things change around so quick. So what's going to work in Tipp's favour here is that the 2 games that they had, I think Liam is able to go back to his players. I think the work rate is going to be higher. Then you had just say Wexford on a complete high. I'm not saying they're finished business, but I'm just saying, will they be happy with the year they had? Yes. Now they're going to live on raw emotion and they're going to come together with a good game plan. But I just think the work rate out of Tipp on Sunday is what's going to get them over the line. Hurling will always look after itself. More often than not, when we went to Croke Park, when we didn't perform, our work rate or things just say didn't work for us. The work rate will be there, and I think then the performance will actually match that. So I'm going to say a Tipp win.
Very interesting. The 2 Munster men have gone for a Limerick Tipperary final. Hey, maybe it's just a coincidence. Unless their championship didn't so well.
Part 3 trilogy, I think we said episode 1.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, actually, I'll give you that one. Yeah.
We might be saying it Monday, but sure.
Well, that's all we have time for. We'll be back for an All-Ireland final preview, and then we'll have another show after that as well. Thanks very much to Lar. Thanks very much to Derek. We'll see you next time. Thanks to the sponsor, Centra. Join the conversation at #WeAreHurling. See you later.